a lot to digest from that first chapter of season 2.
Yep.
What is the most important element we hold on to as we prepare for this chapter 10 that's just a couple days away?
The most important part, I think, as it relates to the series, the most important part is we know what I think we're going to see Mando hunting this year. I think he's going to be looking for more Mandalorians, and the objective that he said was to be able to find more Mandalorians so he could take advantage of their sort of coverts to find his way to bring the child back to his kind, whatever that means. Does his kind mean Jedi? Does it mean more little green men? Don't know. But my key takeaway was, as I watched it, it struck me that the answer at the very end of this episode was to the 37-year-old question: did Boba Fett survive the Sarlacc pit? And to me, it's fairly obvious. Yes, he did.
What was the joy for you? And I mean, Arezou, obviously we're going to talk about your joy too, but Pete is somebody who has been able to enjoy this saga for most of your life. What is that moment like when you see him back on camera, knowing that he's back from the dead, so to say? Yeah. You got to see him die in the Sarlacc pit back in the early 80s. What was that moment like for you?
Well, it's funny because this episode for me as a fan brought in like all kinds of different emotions, because also don't forget, I'm one of the few people that list Chuck Wendig's books at the top of my list of Star Wars books too. So to see the first novel created, written word created character come to life in Cobb Vanth on screen was really wild, really exciting to see, and really cool to get that answer to the question about Boba Fett. The funny thing is, as soon as I saw the title was The Marshal, I was like, yep, that's where we're going with this one. They got us. And then when they introduced Cobb Vanth, and I just thought to myself, well, okay, so Boba Fett died. That's cool. I can deal with that. And the ending, while not as shock value-ish, I'm just making up words now, didn't have the same shock value as the child. There certainly was a like, oh, whoa moment when in fact, when I saw the bald head, I was like, I wonder, is that? And then when he turned around and it was Tamora, it was like, wow. I mean, it was, again, not the same shock value as the child, but a different shock value that was to hardcore fans. I think it was just as valuable.
What I think is so great about the decision to bring back Tamora Morrison as Boba Fett, Arezou, is the fact that you're able to pull on those heartstrings from the original trilogy with Boba Fett, but also a great opportunity to connect to this series, connect it to the prequels, and having the face of the clones. That cohesion is really nice. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily a fan of Tamora being the voiceover now for Boba in the original trilogies and in the special editions following the prequels. I personally, I'm okay with it. It's a little bit more consistent overall. I like that thread. Were you feeling something similar, Arezou? Was that a powerful moment for you? Can you tell us what you felt?
Well, I'm glad I didn't watch this episode with anybody else, because I don't think my family would have liked the very dramatic scream I let out when I turned around. Like, there was flailing. It was a whole thing. So I'm glad I watched this by myself first. I was like, wow. But no, yeah, I, like Dave said, like, I like that cohesion with the prequels. I like that Tamora's back. So yeah, that was my main excitement, because I'm not a huge like Boba Fett fan. Like, he's okay. I'm like, if he's dead, he's alive. It makes no difference to me. Right. But I do like that they are tying things back to the prequels too, and it's not just solely original trilogy focused, because the prequels are my nostalgia, my childhood. So I like that that's coming into play.
I think that's so important for you to mention too, because we are at that point in time now where we're reflecting on our Star Wars. You don't really own it as a fan, but you do have this emotional bond. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was raised on the original trilogy because that's what you had to watch in '96 before the prequels dropped. So I kind of feel like I'm both of our generation and Pete's in a way. I feel like I'm shared between the two. But I will say this. Last week on the show, we talked about Pedro Pascal going on Good Morning America and saying there's a sequence in the first episode that made him think, wow, they're really capable of doing anything at this point, and how they were able to bring it to life. I think it's safe to say at this point that would be the Crate Dragon sequence. You know, the Crate Dragon from the EU. You know what I mean? The Crate Dragon that we've seen the skeleton in the sands of Tatooine ever since we first saw New Hope. I mean, the Crate Dragon that has a pearl that can be shaved down to be a freaking fuel thing for a lightsaber. I mean, this is just blowing my mind on a lot of levels. Guys, when you see that monstrous thing coming out of the sand, I mean, the best line of this whole episode to me is that to scale? I just like it just hit on so many levels. When you saw the Crate Dragon for the first time, how did that hit your mind, Pete? I just, for me, I went numb. Like just now, I went numb.
You know, I think one of the things that's amazing to me is that it was feature film quality. I felt. I mean, some people had made comments that it wasn't, whatever, but I mean, it elevated the game. I mean, the Mudhorn in the second episode was pretty cool, pretty dramatic, but they upped the game here with the Crate Dragon. It looked so good. The scale was you're right. That sort of meta comment that he made about it, that is at the scale. It expanded the universe. You know, one of the things that I was always a little bit afraid of now that we knew how the volume worked was that things would feel confined, right? Even as a backdrop, right? But this felt like they went to the sands of Tunisia to shoot this whole thing. It was pretty, it was incredibly well put together, and it brought that epic film level scale to this series.
I thought the texture of the Crate Dragon was super impressive. It was almost like when I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time, and I just remember that thinking, wow, this is way beyond where I thought you could go with CG. And especially when you have like the sand people launching the I don't know, I'm gonna call them thick arrows. I don't know, the big arrow spears into it. Like that whole sequence, I was like, wow, that looks like that dragon actually exists. And I don't know if I ever imagined what a Crate Dragon really would look like in live action, but I'm pleasantly surprised. It was massive. The way they could use it with humor as well. It comes out, eats a sand person instead of the bantha. You know, just little things to really get you to buy in. And Arezou, I don't know if I'm going a little too strong with this point, but I just feel like they get Star Wars humor with this series, mostly situational. Did you find yourself laughing through this episode? I was chuckling the entire time, Arezou.
I wasn't laughing because I was very tense.
Oh,
because so the Crate Dragon reminded me of the worm from Dune. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't know when it was going to come bursting out of the sand. And like, once they put the bantha there and like there are, you know, explosives everywhere. And of course that never goes to plan. So I was very like on edge the whole time. But that said, I think The Mandalorian is great in general at the situational humor.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally disagreeing, but just in that Crate Dragon moment, I'm like, this isn't funny. This is tense.
Well, and so much of the humor, I think, is reliant in Cobb Vanth. And I made a promise to pull up this image.
Yes.
Because
I want to see him.
Yeah, Arezou likes a man in armor. And we got two on screen. But Cobb Vanth really steals the show, as he should. How do you guys feel like Timothy Oliphant has done with this creation of Chuck Wendig? I feel like he hit on every level. The aesthetic is cool. His voice is awesome. The humor, when he tells the Mandalorian to wait a minute in their standoff inside the cantina, like everything just worked really well for me. Pete, you look like him. What do you think of the character?
Well, you know what? I loved the fact that Star Wars has always flirted with that Western aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And putting Timothy Oliphant from, you know, who did the great work on Deadwood, is a gunslinger. Like he's the unknown Western actor until now. Again, I think everybody's going to become aware of him. I thought he played him perfectly. I thought he almost had Alden Ehrenreich level chops as far as timing, like right, some comedic timing, like the when we said something like "This is going to be good" or something like that. This is going to be fine. But he just had that kind of cockiness where you can kind of see where Han Solo kind of had that same kind of Western vibe, and I thought it was he fit. Let me put the best way to put it. The best compliment I can give him is he fit in the Star Wars universe perfectly.
I absolutely, and I think that when it's not, there was not an effort to push so hard. I feel like he identified that this character was going to work very organically with the characters in the scene, but also with fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I never felt like he was trying to be cool, which is sometimes a vibe I get from these cameo characters, and not just in The Mandalorian, but just kind of across the galaxy. There's a few characters I can think of. But, Arezou, you've read a lot of Chuck Wendig's series. I think you've read all three.
I've read the whole thing.
So, okay.
I've read them all the canon books.
So you're a fan. How much more, is it worth someone like, a casual Star Wars fan? Why is it worth them checking out the Aftermath trilogy to get a little bit more Cobb Vanth storyline?
I think Cobb Vanth in the series makes Cobb Vanth in the books more interesting. Because in the books, the Aftermath books, the way they're structured is there's the main narrative, and there's these little interludes that are just 1 or 2 chapters about like cameo characters essentially in the galaxy, and Cobb Vanth is one of those. So he's only in cameos throughout the series, but I think this makes him more interesting in retrospect because whenever he pops up, it's usually playing into somebody else's story. So that's like, even when they announced that Cobb Vanth would be in The Mandalorian, it took me a minute to put it together. Because I didn't make that association right away. So I think now if you enjoyed Cobb Vanth here, then it would be worth checking the books out.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that Cobb Vanth was one of the coolest characters from that Aftermath trilogy. Obviously, there's the connection there with the armor. And I have seen some fans of the books and of The Mandalorian kind of going back and forth about how does this version of the character manipulate maybe the origins that we got in the book. And I think that as fans, we need to have some flexibility. Go ahead.
It doesn't even change it that much, I don't think.
It's interesting. I think there's been a couple conversations just recently on my show where I've had conversations with authors and things. We talk about canon versus legends and things like that. And the way I took it was we got the version that Cobb told him while they were on the speeder on the way to where they were going. The book gives you the actual what happened, and it wasn't that far off. It's like he left out some of it, right?
Yeah.
He speeded along through the story to tell a different story, So
he's telling the beats Mando needs to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I know that we like to always tell you what's like next and what things mean, but real quick, the fact that his speeder is an engine of Anakin's pod racer, is that making it too small, or is that a really nice Easter egg?
I think it's a nice Easter egg. If you don't know, it doesn't take away from the scene at all. But if you know, you'd be like, "That's Anakin!" And then you can get that's Anakin, and you can get really excited about.
Well, a lot of people were pissed off, Pete, when they saw Phantom Menace, and they're like, "Vader built C-3PO, bullshit."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Well, is this on the same level as that?"
To me, it is a small galaxy. It's a huge galaxy, but it's also very small, and stories are boring if they're not connected, right? And so I in my head canon, this is a common engine somewhere on Tatooine. And it's more likely that Anakin built it out of 2 speeders versus the other way around. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it was that sort of reminder of, hey, remember this? And again, it was enough so that you noticed it. Those of us who are complete nerds about things, we picked it up. But one of the things that's really interesting, and I want to touch on it really, really quick, is I asked 2 friends of mine who are Star Wars fans, but not,
in the life,
right? What they thought of the end scene, and not one of them, of the 2, picked up that it was Boba Fett or Tamora Morrison or Jango Fett. They were just like, yeah, that was cool. Like somebody's watching. So but it worked for them still. Like to them, it was, they're being watched kind of a thing versus where we're like, they're being watched by Boba Fett. So, but it'll be interesting to see how they carry this character over into future episodes.
Well, chapter 10, I mean, we're going to learn exactly how Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc pit, right? I mean, what do we think that's going to be? Do you think it's going to be the Krayt dragon that ate that Sarlacc pit, allowed him to escape? Was he able to malfunction that jetpack again and fly out? I mean, Or we want to take some stabs at this before we move on to the next topic?
I want episode. Here's how I want chapter 10 to start. I want to start with Din coming up to the Razor Crest, and waiting for him there is Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, just waiting for him and saying, "Give me my armor back." And then they have to work together or something. I think it would be really cool if somehow Boba Fett became an integral part to Din's journey as a Mandalorian. I think that would be really, really wild. I also don't know. My other prediction for episode 10 is I don't think we're going to see much of the Mandalorian. I think we're going to get a story about Moff Gideon this week. I don't know why. I just feel like we are.
See, I think what this allows to have happen is because you have a Boba Fett back. What, and this is just hypotheticals.
Yeah.
What if it's Fennec Shand? What if it's also Cad Bane back?
No, that would be great. I mean,
Now,
that's
Not actually.
not actually.
I said in live action.
Oh, like not actually. It was like, all right, let's go.
Not
You,
actually.
me, let's go.
No, but I'm being serious. Like, here's, when I'm thinking about like, if you brought in Boba Fett, because this is what I don't. For some reason, I think it'd be so cool if they would somehow bring that deleted scene from Clone Wars back. So you have Boba with Fennec trying to track down the Mandalorian, who's got the Boba Fett armor from freaking Timothy Oliphant, right? Because that's the canon character's name. Okay, and then they're in the streets of Tatooine. They can be in Mos Pelgo or wherever the hell they are, and then it's like Boba Fett just gets the armor back on, and then boom, right around the corner, Cad Bane is there, and he says something like, "Well, I've been waiting for this," or whatever, and then Bo kills him. So you get Boba back, you kill Cad Bane, and I mean, like, holy shit! I mean, what more do you want in an episode of The Mandalorian? I just think that would be. I'm just wishful thinking at this point because I just got the new Cad Bane Black Series figure, and I'm just like, I want this guy back in live action so bad. Realistically, I don't think that's going to happen, but I really do think that we are going to get the story of how he escaped. There's a story behind those scars, and it might just be as simple as how he got out of that pit. What do you think about The Mandalorian Chapter 10? We want to know what you think. Let us know in the live chat. If you support my day drinking, let me know. And then if you have any point on that, or if you like Pete's theory, or if you like Arezou's take on what happened in Chapter 9, let us know down in the comments below, or tweet us at BTBD Star Wars.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Blast Doors. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Beyond the Blast Doors, a Star Wars conversation.